When people think of the 1960s, they typically think of music, hippies, and drugs. All three met on August 15, 1969, in what was touted as 3 days of peace and music. Taking place on Max Yasgur's 600-acre farm, the festival would come to be known as Woodstock. It featured some of the most popular acts of the day, with artists like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Carlos Santana filling out the massive bill. The concert-goers were remarkably kind and generous towards each other, and the quality of the music was undeniable. Fond memories aside, Woodstock was a near disaster plagued by rain, ill-equipped facilities, and tainted LSD, better known as acid. Through hardship, however, the event miraculously worked and has never been recreated. In the 1960s, music was changing dramatically. 50s rock and roll was kicked into overdrive with fast tempos, distorted electric guitars, and sexually charged lyrics. British bands like the Rolling Stones and Cream based their style off of black American blues musicians and brought the style of music to middle-class whites. In America, bands like the Jimi Hendrix Experience, the Beach Boys, and the Grateful Dead defined popular music. While rock dominated, folk and blues were also prominent on both sides, with featured artists like Janis Joplin and Bob Dylan. The purveyors of said music were commonly known as hippies, rebellious teens and young adults who rejected the norms of society in favor of more independent expression. Non-hippies, or squares as they came to be known, wore modest clothing, had neat hair, respected authority, and held white-collar jobs. Hippies preferred bright, colorful clothing, long hair, mind-altering drugs, and cooperation. A vast number of them lived in communes, group living areas where free love reigned, sharing was the rule, and competition was non-existent. The most famous of the communes was the Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco. Woodstock has been described as a finale to the hippie era, but it didn't start out that way. It began with two young men, Artie Kornfeld and Michael Lang, who were in the music business. Kornfeld was the vice president of Capitol Records, while Lang had produced the Miami Pop Festival. When the two met, they immediately hit it off and began to come up with business ideas. They finally settled between two ideas: a recording studio in the woods, or a massive rock concert, the largest one the world had ever seen. Their lawyer suggested they meet with John Roberts and Joel Rosenman, two wealthy entrepreneurs looking for a way to make money. After meeting with Rosenman and Roberts, the four young men formed Woodstock Ventures Incorporated and came up with a plan. They would create the concert first and then use the profits for the recording studio later. The famous Woodstock poster is not what it appears at first glance. Though commonly called the Woodstock Dove, the bird is actually a catbird, according to the artist Arnold Skolnick. Also, the guitar was originally a flute. He later changed it, and with good reason. Flutes at Woodstock were sorely outnumbered by guitars. Bands that showed up included Jefferson Airplane, the Latin fusion music of Santana, The Who performed a massive 2-hour set,
I hope I die before I get old.
and the Jimi Hendrix Experience, which ended the show. Some bands that were invited to come but declined included Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, and the Doors. There were many problems and mishaps with Woodstock, some worse than others. The rain was on and off at the festival, making the field muddy and wet. When it rained during the Grateful Dead's performance, the band only played 4 songs because the wet equipment electrified the guitar strings, shocking the players every time they struck a chord. Because the number of people who showed up greatly exceeded the estimates, the workers eventually let everybody in for free. Consequently, there were not enough bathrooms, medical facilities, or police officers to help the situation. Several drugs were passed around, especially LSD. The acid was sometimes tainted, however, and caused several problems among the concert-goers. However, there were no arrests made because of the sore lack of police officers. If a riot had ensued, the crowd would have been impossible to handle. Though not without its problems, Woodstock was a highly successful event. 2 children were even born at the festival. Ironically, 2 people died as well. One was run over by a tractor, and the other one experienced a heroin overdose. Despite the setbacks, Woodstock was a true cultural phenomenon, and has been celebrated as one of the greatest moments in rock history. It was indeed a special time and place there in Bethel, New York, 1969.